Hello everyone, thanks for watching. What we got here today is a bit of a review of a couple of the late 90s, early 2000s sport 4x4 machines. I hear it, I see it all the time, the Scrambler 400 versus the 500. Which one's better, which one's faster, that kind of stuff. And thankfully I am fortunate enough to have one of each. They're both in stock form with the exception of my 500 having a different set of tires, but they are the exact same size as factory tires. So it shouldn't make any difference that sort of way. It's got one headlight, should have two, but I'm thinking of selling the 400, so I've been kind of making sure that it's a little better shape than my 500. Maybe I'll go ahead and put an LED light on it, make it that much better at night. Both machines, as I was saying, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, these were the cool machines to have. Four-wheel drive, you had solid rear axles, sport, semi-sport suspension. They were fairly fast. You got to remember back then, you know, the average four-wheeler was a Sportsman, or a big four-wheeler was a Sportsman 500. You had the Grizzly 660s, those were the kings. So these things worked pretty good. They still are a lot of fun. I really prefer riding them instead of this thing. I have the 850 here just to kind of show some of the differences. You know, what years of progression has brought us, but the main goal is to test out these guys. I've got, we'll drag race them. We'll do a top speed run, see which one's better. The 500 is by far my favorite. Nothing wrong with the 400, just completely different power. The 500 seems to want to jump up and wheelie and get the back end sideways a little better right off initial thumb push. The 400 is a two-stroke, so it takes a bit of time to get rolling. I would guess the 400 is probably a little bit faster, feels faster, but the 500 has the bottom end grunt. 500 essentially has the Sportsman 500 motor in it. Nothing real fancy, just a different graphic, different chain, sorry, not chain, different frame design. The 400 has the old Explorer 400 motor in it. Good motors, seem to work good. I've never had any issues with mine. The one thing that, you know, back in 2000s or the 90s, the 2000s, there wasn't a bunch of huge machines out there. So these are chain drive. You don't have a ton of ground clearance, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, that didn't matter. All the trails were, you know, if there was mud, it was no big deal to get around. If, you know, they were all nice trails. They weren't rutted and dug up and stuff like that. Now, if you look at obviously the new machines, way more horsepower, you're a lot more ground clearance as well, which definitely helps with the trails. You know, everybody has a 1000cc machine or 850s, and they're just ripping the hell out of everything, and you know, it just destroys the trails, and you get caught up with these machines, where the new ones you don't. So that's the one negative thing about these guys. Other than that, they are, you know, very decent machines, work well on the trails as long as you don't have a lot of ruts, and they're light. Compared to that 850, these things feel like they're half the machine. You can bounce them through trails and jump over stuff, and, you know, not have an issue that way. They're just way more nimble, way more fun, in my honest opinion. Sorry everyone, had the neighbor come in and say hi. So the only real differences between the 400 and the 500 is the seat. Now this seat actually belongs in the 400. As you can tell, it's a little skinnier, and I like it better. And if I'm going to sell the 400, the seats are so interchangeable, I just popped it off. This 500 seat is actually better if you're carrying passengers and stuff, but I like the skinnier one a little bit better. The one cool thing, and I don't know if it's because this one's the Scrambler X, it's got the Fox shock on the back, and it also has this nifty little water bottle holder. It's not waterproof or mud-proof in any way, shape, or form, but it's pretty cool. You can carry a water bottle with you and drink a real warm water bottle halfway through your ride, where the 500 doesn't have that. And the 500 does have a trailer hitch. That's an aftermarket thing. I put that on as well. Just because the 500's got a little more grunt for pulling. Now, obviously, the new Scramblers are bigger, more powerful, independent rear suspension instead of the standard swing arm chain setup. And then we've got, everything's just a little bit bigger on the 500. Or sorry, not the 500, the 850. More fancy, more tech savvy gauges. The one thing they did do right on this one is put a low gear. The 400 to the 500 do not have a low gear on them, which kind of, I mean, they're not designed for pulling stuff, but it would definitely help. You got the motor from the Sportsman 500. You may as well put the transmission in there too. But, I mean, regardless, they work pretty good. I've went through a belt once in the 500 pulling someone out because we didn't have low gear, and this one was the only option. So, anyways, yeah, definitely the 850s and 1000s. I got the 850 because the 1000s are huge when you go for a new one, and I didn't want one of those. They don't fit in the trails. But the 850s are way more of a machine, way more power. But the fun factor is not there that these two provide. These are a lot of fun. If you can ever get a chance to ride one, or if you have some nice, and they don't even have to be smooth trails, but not rutted out trails, you know, from four-wheelers that just go out and rip up the trails and go through mud and that kind of stuff. These things are a blast. They're light, they're nimble, and I mean, they're not actually light, but they really feel light, and they work well. Let's go race these things. All right, this is a 500 top speed. Top speed. Faster. Alright everyone, thank you very much for watching. So what we came up with our little bit of test here is just about neck and neck up to the Scrambler 500's top speed. As soon as it gets to the top speed, the 400 has an extra 4 mile an hour, 5 mile an hour faster, so it will creep ahead. And as you let her get wound out, it'll go obviously faster and faster the two-stroke way. I still like my 500 a little bit better. It does have a little more power just off the bottom end, kind of wheelie power, right off the hop. The 400 is equally as fast, if that makes any sense, but it just doesn't lift the front end like the 500 does. And typical two-stroke, you just got to build power. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. These things were a lot closer than I expected them to be.